And now, welcome David Montero, Brooke Hopper, Stefanie Hutka for the panel How AI is Reshaping Creativity and Collaboration.
All right. How are we doing? I'm going to tell you, I'm having a blast. This has been amazing. There are a couple of things that I look for when I'm in these events. The first thing is storytelling. And I can tell you, by 10 a.m., I had my first share. I was full. Impressive. And the types of stories that I like to hear a lot is history walkthroughs. Yesterday was full of that. We keep on going back to the same things in history, tech advances, society advances, but we keep on having the same human instincts and the same human feelings, and personal stories. And I hope we are going to have our fair share of both in this conversation. We were just having a water cooler conversation out there. If this is half as good, that's amazing. My name is David Montero. I'm a designer at Roblox. I design AI tools for developers. And I'm here with two of the people that I admire the most. These girls are fantastic. They're amazing. We are way back from where we're working at Adobe, and they are fantastic leaders. So I'll have to read notes because their achievements are way too long. They're a really big deal. First, we have the incredible Brooke. She's the first ever.
Wow, I'm very delighted. Although I have to say, I was told not to shake my head backstage because
Just not.
yeah.
Yeah. Smile.
I'll just smile and
smile
nod.
and nod. Yeah. She's the first ever senior principal designer at Adobe. And we have been working at Adobe. I know it's a super big deal. I could stop there, but I want to stop there. She's working in the machine intelligence and new technology team. Those are the folks that brought you Firefly. She is also the public face of Firefly with the community. And she's doing an amazing work on addressing community concerns when it comes to generative AI and their privacy. It's something really, really important. Before that, she was leading Adobe Fresco. I don't know if you have used that app, but it's impressive. It feels like painting on paper. She was going through that app for 3 versions and working with the community since the beginning, since the very beginning, building an illustration tool for illustrators. She's a speaker, an evangelist at events like South by Southwest, Config, Adobe Max, and as I said before, a champion for artists, always advocating for their protections in generative AI. Next, we have Steph. Steph is the mastermind behind Sendfull, where she's helping teams helping build usable emerging tech solutions. She has a PhD in psychology focusing on cognitive neuroscience. She has led research for several 0 to 1 spatial computing products like Adobe Aero, MetaQuest 3, holds several patents and multiple publications on XR and brain-computer interfaces. She's also a public speaker, author, a startup mentor, an adjunct professor at UC Berkeley. She publishes a regular news Substack where she talks about design, strategy, human behavior, and she's an impressive violinist.
Thanks, David.
I've witnessed that. It's awesome. Okay, a little bit of housekeeping. We are going to take your questions at the end of the panel. So you scan here this QR code. I'm going to read them on the iPad, and you'll have the chance to ask anything to Steph and Brooke. So let's get started. You both have an impressive list of achievements. ChatGPT had a hard time summarizing that, but did a fair job. But I said before, I like personal stories, and I want to know what's your origin story. So what brought you to this moment? I'll start with you, Brooke.
I mean, serendipity, honestly, and curiosity, a love for design. We were talking earlier. My original undergrad degree is graphic design. I was in finance for a couple of years, and I was just dying. I mean, it was fine. I could have done it. I would not be a happy person. And this is dating me a little bit, but I have a friend who said, hey, there's this major. It's like computers and art combined. It's called graphic design. I was like, that sounds good. And I signed up for it, not knowing what it was. And so I have to say, like, that's kind of what brought me here today. And I feel like that's a really good explanation of how I got here. I just do things that are fun and exciting, and yeah. Glad to be here.
I feel you. I work on IT for 7 years. I was dead inside. Yeah, I feel that. Steph?
Yeah, so my origin story starts with creativity and goes into cognition. I feel like those two words are really central. So my early days, I was a musician since I was about this high, playing violin, and that led me into my area of my PhD, which was cognitive neuroscience, particularly how the brain perceives and processes audio and how musical behavior influences that. And so that was the beginning of understanding brain and behavior in a deep way. And that led me to a startup after finishing my PhD, where I was working on brain-computer interfaces for augmented reality headsets. And like fast forward way ahead, that sort of combination of creativity and cognition is very much where I'm at today, and so applicable to this moment when we're talking about the software, like cognition and AI, hardware, and this merger that we're.
And your background is so interesting. Actually, she interviewed me for my job at Adobe. She was part of the. She was my host, and it's the first time that I've asked to stay longer at an interview. I asked her if she had more time because I wanted to know about her thesis. It was fascinating. Let's go to the topic of this whole conference, that is AI for creatives. And let's begin talking a little bit about the current state of things. Maybe this is a good time to remind all of you, this is a comms disclaimer, opinions, our own, don't represent our employer. They might align or not align. But yeah, we are speaking just for ourselves. So Brooke, Steph, in the past 2 years, we have seen significant ways in which AI tools have reshaped our day-to-day design workflows. We all are using them today. What is the most surprising way AI has changed your own design work?
Me? I'll take this one first. So I do a lot of speaking, workshopping, teaching as part of my practice, and using AI tools as a sparring partner, and also to be able to help me scaffold images to support storytelling and communication. That has, I think, up-leveled a lot of my work, and I'm able to go farther because of those things. So I've had a very positive boost from AI. I'll say at the same time, I haven't personally experienced this, but I know some folks who do design research and strategy have also commented how, while there are a lot of helpful tools, also the expectation that comes along with those tools has risen. So while you might be able to use, say, AI for analyzing themes and interviewing data, maybe other stakeholders now think, okay, you can just do that in a couple of hours. And so like the expectation is raised up, but I'm thankful in my own practice that hasn't come up as much.
How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to speak about it from two different standpoints. The first standpoint is from my personal practice, which is not as much as it used to be, unfortunately. But I feel like it's sparked a ton of play in the work that I do, just because of the serendipitous results sometimes that you get. I can make stuff that I wouldn't have made before. And I think that is really, to me, that's the beauty of Gen AI in particular, is that serendipitous discovery that sparks a creativity that takes you to a different point. And I love the talk this morning with the videos. It's like, those were weird and they were fun, and you can make it in a few hours, and it's so satisfying to do that. And so that's from one aspect. From the UX and product design aspect of it, one thing that we have been doing a lot internally at Adobe is we're doing a lot of our own prototypes. Now, we do have a prototyping team, and they're kind of happy because now they can prototype the fun stuff rather than prototyping, small things that are, maybe not as fun. But doing some vibe coding and really testing stuff out in advance has been super helpful. To jump onto what Steph said about, expectations, I think that is one of the things I find maybe is a little bit on the downside, and I think that we'll find a way to even it out. But working in product and working in an industry that is accelerating so fast, we have to churn stuff out super quickly. And one of the important things about design, as we all know, is being able to really, kind of sit with it for a little bit. And we're not able to do that yet. And I'm really hoping that tools will catch up and maybe help with some of that. Or, I'm not really for sure how to solve that one quite yet. One of my concerns is that, we have AI requires some different patterns interactions. We don't have to, but I think to make the experience better, we explore those. And I think that's something that we're not, at Adobe anyway, that I'm not quite able to do as much as I would like to do just because of the speed of production.
Yeah, that's very true. As designers, we need like a time to explore and to iterate. We were talking about that before. One of the things that AI is going to give us so much free time, right? We shouldn't use that free time to just produce more stuff, but more using that time to explore and not just keep on getting things out of the box. Yeah, that's a good takeaway. You were talking also that you are doing your prototyping. So you release Firefly. How do you see that integrating AI into Adobe's products? What is the impact that you see that is having on creative processes now? What is it enabling?
Yeah, I mean, people get to spend less time doing stuff like, doing a bunch of masking and things like that. You can quickly make changes to your work. I mean, that from, speaking from my perspective, I've been around since sort of the beginning of Firefly, or, what was before Firefly. And the whole intent was to integrate it into the tools. I mean, that's really where it shines the most, is when you can use it in the tools. So if you're in, Premiere Pro, for example, being able to extend your videos easily right in the shot, or add sound effects immediately, or we recently released something called mask tracking, where you can create one mask and it will track it throughout the scene if you need to do something, which is awesome. And so I think that's the, speeding up the processes that are really boring and are going to cramp your hand doing it. I think that's really the key, is like opening yourself up for more time to actually do the creative work.
Yeah. You have spent time educating people on what is the difference with different types of AI.
Yeah.
And you're a little bit touching on that we had AI tools and creation tools for a really long time. We're just not calling them AI, but now with generative AI, it looks like it's the first time. I mean, it's something new, but we have these accelerators.
Totally. I mean, it's actually shocking to me. I do a lot of sort of AI 101, and my pet peeve is when people say no AI, and they actually mean no Gen AI. And I still do, even when I go talk, I say, hey, how many in here use spell check? Hey, guess what? That's AI. And like, I've heard gasps before, and it's just like, I think that's the state. This is a very educated group of people, and we forget that there's still the general public and also a lot of creatives who just aren't educated on what the technology actually is, and I think that's super important.
Yeah. Steph, from the academic and research perspective, because you're also teaching at Berkeley, what are the most interesting, or perhaps the most unexpected ways that you have seen this applied in your practice and your colleagues and also your students? I bet there are interesting things.
Yeah, so interesting ways that I've seen AI tools applied. I see a lot more students using tools like Cursor, and they're able to get a lot farther. So previously, even like 2 years ago, the deliverable at the end of a class or a capstone project, you might have had some screen designs, but now you might actually have a working prototype. And so what I've heard from students now, so I created a course called Designing Future Systems, all about systems thinking, and I hear a lot about the shift moving from like creator of deliverables to moving towards more orchestrating bigger picture, like thinking about how do all these pieces come together. So seeing that kind of shift in how students are approaching the design process, that's probably the biggest piece.
Yes, and you said that they're using new tools. With that comes new skills, right? How do they feel with their coursework, their curriculum? Is it mapping their expectations to these new skills that are acquiring? Do they think there's a mismatch what there's in the curriculum, and if their skills are going to be useful for them in the future?
Well, we're going to need a longer panel. So I do hear, despite the fact that students are really adopting a lot of the new tools as they're coming out and applying them, I think there's definitely feedback around there's a mismatch of like, am I learning what I need to be relevant on the job, which is hard to say because AI is moving at this unprecedented pace and unlocking new capabilities that didn't exist 2 weeks ago. So how do you stay current? And like what I tell students, we were talking about this earlier, is like stay curious, growth mindset, like just keep bringing these tools into your workflow and you'll adapt and it will be okay. But there is also this existential concern of like, why am I studying design at all? Like, will I be replaced when I look out? And I reassure students that my point of view is that AI is redefining craft. It's not replacing craft. And in order to move with that shift, like remaining curious is really part of that. Like your role probably won't look like it, like whatever you think you're doing now, it won't look like that in 5 years. But if you keep experimenting and seeing how these tools can serve you.
Yeah, I would actually, to add to that, I would actually almost argue you don't want your role to be in 5 years what it is today.
Yes.
I mean, that sounds boring. One of the reasons why I'm in the creative field is because I love things changing all the time. Like that is exciting to me. That's really inspiring. And so, I don't think we would necessarily even want that. And then also to add to that something else that I tell students a lot is storytelling and understanding design fundamentals is more important now than ever before. Because guess what? Anyone can generate a cool video. Anyone can, generate a cool image or put things together. But if you don't understand the fundamentals of what makes a good story, what makes a good design, what makes a good layout or composition, it's nothing.
Yeah, transferable skills, and that's something that has happened not so far ago, right? I was talking with a friend coming here about what happened with Flash, and that it wasn't overnight. It was literally one sentence on a stage to kill the whole discipline. And they had to adapt, but they still had these transferable skills about animation, about motion, that it was very adapted to HTML and CSS.
Yep.
A lot of them became front-end designers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I work at Adobe now, but I have to say I was happy about that. I was a production designer in an agency, and I saw way too much Flash.
Let's talk a little bit about the near future or immediate future. So then we see a transformation that is not only changing the way we work, but also like the product team, and we're all product designers, we work in product teams, and the corporate structure as well. So we are seeing a shift in product design research roles. What new specializations you see that they might start emerging? How do you think that product team in the next 3 to 5 years is going to look like?
That's a good question. I'm happy to answer. Oh, okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I think really what I'm hoping will happen is that a lot of the automated, a lot of the production work just is automated. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. I think for a while people were saying, oh, prompt engineers is the thing. I don't really hear that anymore. I personally believe that, the best way to create something with Gen AI is to do it with what feels natural, and a lot of that is drawing and doing things the way that people have done for thousands of years. That's why I was telling a couple of people on my team, I think I saw like 3, cave paintings, yesterday, and like, but that's really what it is like our fundamental forms of creativity are fundamental for a reason. And so I think getting rid of those production tasks will make no one sad.
Yeah, so I can comment a little bit on what we've been seeing with how the design process is changing. I put a paper together on this and published it last year, and it was based on teaching 1 foot in the classroom and 1 foot in practice and working with product teams. And you probably are taught the double diamond and this idea of like, okay, we'll explore problem space, at least in an ideal world. I mean, how many of us have jumped into a team and the solution's already kind of baked, and you're sort of doing, is it useful and usable at the same time? But you start with problem space, diverge, converge, go into your solution. And sort of the shift that we seem to be seeing is that you have the solution first push unlocking these new problem spaces at sort of unprecedented speed. It's like you have a solution to more problems than developers ever knew existed. I think the co-founder of Y Combinator said that. And so as a result, when you're building new products, there's a sequencing going on of, okay, you have maybe the presence of a foundation model that you're building off of at the very outset. So you have the sort of solution that you're working with. So how do you sequence what problems you're solving for people, what value are you bringing, and that sort of loop of going between problem and solution and how design teams are working together. I think that loop is getting tighter and tighter. And so how can designers stay tethered to what is that user value, and how do you communicate with other folks on the team and ensure that you're still solving something that's bringing value, but also really thinking about what are the technology's capabilities. So, and yeah, how do you sequence different touch points? I have this sort of funnel of like, if you have problem space and solution space at some point, at launch, hopefully they are one thing and you're creating something that's really showcasing your technology's capabilities and delivering user value.
Yeah, you also develop a framework to design for emerging technologies and how to and not being constantly catching up to changes, and we have been seeing in stage before talking about, well, by the time that we got ready with this video, there was a new model and we had to re-render the whole thing. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the framework?
Yeah, so what I just described, I call that the problem solution symbiosis framework. There's a couple of different tools of, all right, I've described, we need to sequence these things. How do we actually do that? And so I have 3 different tools. The one that I spend the most time on is something called the cognitive offloading matrix. It's like, what do we, so what are sort of the human strengths? In this case, this might be your stakeholders or your users. And then what are sort of the machine strengths that's rooted in like old school human factors, something called the fits list from the 50s, and that's kind of on the x-axis, and then you have kind of level of automation on the y-axis, and depending which, if you look across a user journey or if you have a certain problem space, so what goes into which box, and so if you have something that is more squarely human value and like clearly like this should not be automated, maybe the tech capability isn't there yet, or there's high consequence, status quo, people keep doing the thing. If it's something that can be automated and it's like a machine, it's a machine strength, but maybe we still need control. That's a human in the loop. Maybe there's something that can be fully automated, and you kind of get into the danger quadrant of we can automate it. The capabilities are there, but it's within the domain of what is human. Should we? Just because we can, should we do it? And that's where really interesting design research conversations happen.
Yeah, then at work we have been quoting your framework a couple of times, and that goes also to how training and education of junior designers as well on these new skills that are coming up and the way to communicate your ideas to the rest of the team, the type of artifacts, and the types of skills that will be required. What do you think in the corporate world, in the product team, the skills, the new breed of designers, which type of skills will they need?
Curiosity and the ability to work in ambiguity. I think those are the top 2. When I'm hiring people, or if people are saying like, what are you looking for? I'm like, curiosity. If you're curious, I'm confident you will learn anything. And I think that's why we're all here, is we're curious and we're excited about what this stuff is doing, and we don't have it all figured out, and that's okay. Like we're here to play and we're here to explore, and as a creative group of people, that's our purpose, And so I think that's the biggest thing. I think one other thing I would also say is a lot of what I run across is because technology is accelerating so quickly, you come across a lot of like really freaking amazing solutions, and then you go in search of a problem, and when you're working on a product team, that is not a good way to work. The product market fit just it can be hard, and so I think it's the ability to understand, like, yes, I am so mesmerized by this amazing technology and the possibilities of what it could do, but what is the reality of the situation, and is there a place for it that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, we have been working in the augmented reality space for 10 years, looking for a use case for AR glasses, and yeah, can can really relate. And what you're saying about the speed of production, yesterday mentioned this concept, infinite content.
Yeah.
Will there be a product market fit for all the content that we're producing? Who's going to consume it? How are we going to find an audience for it?
Yeah.
Products sell products.
Yeah.
How are we going to do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I brought this up on Monday evening. I was talking to a group of people, some of you in here, and we were talking about this infinite content. I don't even know what I would call it, situation. And it reminded me of an essay from grad school that I read around, it was sort of like at the transformation of analog into digital. And I'm totally blanking on who wrote it, but it was all around digital waste and digital trash. And I think that's really interesting, not necessarily from, no one's going to see this content, but just from being mindful about what we're putting out and thinking about what it is. I mean, obviously there's play for play. I think that's something different. But like when it gets into business, I think there is this sort of notion of digital trash or generative trash, and like, what are we putting out there?
Yeah, and we were talking about that before as well, with the infinite content as well. We see that the new tools, they're kind of accelerating really coding, and you have your students using Cursor, but creative tools, at least in the product world, they are not really catching up at the same speed. So we will end up in a situation in which you have an engineering team that can produce like 10x the speed, but research and design cannot really catch up. How do you see teams compensating this imbalance?
I think from the research side, I mean, it's tricky. I think because of that acceleration and seeing that in other disciplines, there is the assumption that I think a lot of the pieces that would be in that matrix I described, like firmly in the human realm, like framing and reframing the problem, making sure you're asking the right questions, building rapport with participants if you're doing qualitative research. I think there's this expectation of, sure, like can't we just offload that? Like there are tools that can do that, but how well can they do that? And the answer is very poorly. And I'd argue the framing, reframing part is something we should never offload. Like that is part of the deep craft of design in general and design research. So I think there is definitely tension there, and like I think there's also like around like aligning stakeholders. That's another sort of special sauce in bringing people together. I think where we can lean in is to that systems orchestration. If that is where we're moving, like Brooke was saying, storytelling will be preserved. So how maybe researchers can given that everything is moving that fast, like how can you bring people together to maybe facilitate knowledge sharing or facilitate, get all sort of the Legos out on the table of like, what are we building? What are we bringing value? Can we workshop to understand the capabilities of our tools? So trying to use those superpowers, things that we won't offload, to try and bring maybe a human-centered lens and work with the pace of design. I don't know. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, so it comes to use of tools and how can you get the most out of it? And there are some disciplines that are going to benefit the most, where some other will kind of feel like lag behind. That also reminds me, there's in the last weeks there have been a lot of companies like announcing we are going to go AI first, and we are going to introduce AI in all our processes, and we are going to ask our employees to use AI tools, and we are going to use AI usage as part of our performance evaluations of employees. I want to know, what do you feel about that?
I mean, aren't they all already using AI?
Yeah.
I mean, it goes down to my pet peeve of AI, ML, Gen AI. They're all already using it, so 100%. I think it's interesting. I mean, it's a way to try to push the business forward and get people to adopt stuff. The thing that I have been seeing, especially with creative teams across different companies, is if you tell a creative team, you're like, hey, you are required now to use Gen AI as part of your process, 90% of the time they're like, okay, where? Like, they need training to understand what is possible. A lot of times they don't know what they don't know, and so you have to go in, and I do a lot of workshops with teams and saying like, hey, here's a fake problem. Let's see how we could solve that, like create the garment of 2050 using Gen AI. I don't know. Just different types of exercises so they can understand where it makes sense for them. I recently worked with a customer of Adobe creating an entirely generated 30-second spot, which for them was like actually a really big deal because they're very slow to adopt technology. And for them, it was less about what actually came out of it and more about them figuring out where in the process it made sense for them to use it. And so I think this sort of like testing and sort of trial and error process, as many of you have all done already, is really what we're going to see in the next few years with companies.
Yeah, I see that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what tool you're using, right? In my opinion, the performance evaluation should be about the outcome and not the tool that you use. And at the end, we're going to be all of us using AI, and we shouldn't be using these tools for AI sake.
I have maybe a counterpoint, or I don't know, depending where you stand on the, should we have, how much should we automate or not? But there was also, I think in the last week or so, Klarna for customer support, they were all like AI first, and like let's automate all the things. They're actually bringing back real people into the customer service pipeline. So I feel like that's an interesting thing. Maybe to Brooke's point, what type of AI are we using? But yeah, maybe not often.
Yeah, there's a lot of exploration. It's interesting because right across the street there's this billboard from Framer, and I see that one, a similar one, and on the 101 when I drive to work, and it says your designer can ship it. I don't know what to think about that, but yeah, companies are exploring how to use these and to improve their performance.
Yeah, I think there's also something thinking about the possibilities of what it means when the designer can ship this, and thinking about smaller teams doing more. I think we're already seeing signals of this, not just in the AI space, but even if we look at the movie Flow that won an Academy Award, I think that was a team of like 5 to 6 people in Latvia using Blender. And so you might see more proliferation of smaller teams doing really like world-class things. I think that's one of the things I'm really excited about with the designer being able to ship it. Of course, there's another conversation about, if you go with that analogy of maybe you're moving from first violin to conductor, if there's only one conductor, there's a lot more first violin. So that's sort of the other side of that coin, but I don't know, I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Let's fast forward a little bit, like 5 to 10 years here. We can expect that there will be much more mature AI integration. The quality will be much better. Let's make some predictions about how this is going to go. Through history, the definition of work has changed. What will be your definition of work in this AI future?
Oh, this is a trick question. I didn't know this one was coming. Do you have an answer?
I'll come back to that conductor, big picture orchestrator role. I think there'll be a lot more of that. I mean, that is why, like, putting together that course on systems thinking, I mean, maybe using service design as maybe a analog, I think there's definitely going to be more of a shift towards, thinking about how, like, orchestrating all these pieces moving together. We're not doing as much, like, detailed deliverable work, but seeing the big picture. So, like, what do all of our respective roles look like if we zoom up to that sort of macro level? So I suspect there'll be, even just today thinking about some of the announcements of the big tech companies this week, it's like, agents orchestrating agents, but who's making the agent that's orchestrating the agent's agents? Maybe that's us. Right. So something like that, something around, it's this conductor role is my response.
Yeah. I think, I always take a look at things from the creator or artist perspective. I think our work is going to be to push boundaries and explore more. I mean, when we get to a point where the machine can do the level of work that we do today as humans, our role is going to be to push that. And I think it was Claudio yesterday, his fourth point was, push the boundaries. Like, we have to do that. Otherwise, or do we just end up in homogeny? That sounds terrible. I don't want to live in a world of homogenous anything. And so I think that for the role of the creative is going to be to really, really push and, be provocative. Not that we aren't already, but I think it's even more important, actually.
I think building on what Brooke said around areas to push, we're talking a little bit about new interaction patterns as well, and I think that's a really exciting space. Like, even thinking, like, I think it was in Leonardo De La Roca's talk yesterday, that graph of the cognitive AI software side and the hardware side, and eventually those things will converge. So like thinking about all of these AI tools that are multimodal and starting getting into like embodied AI and robotics, like that's really exciting. Like this is a very wide open space, and everyone here is great at defining interaction patterns. And so thinking about what does that look like as hardware sort of starts to mirror our perceptual system, how do we design for multiple senses very effectively? So I think that's an exciting area for everyone in this room to be leading.
Yeah. One more thing on that. Now we're going, and just one more thing. We were speculating earlier, or I was speculating earlier, I should say. Maybe you two don't want to take credit for it, but right now I tend to look at Gen AI as like it's helping out mostly with the ideation process. Yes, there's some things that can end up going into production, and we're seeing that obviously here. But it made me wonder, is the role of Gen AI going to go less from ideation? Like, yes, it will still have a role there, but more into the actual, to your point, like the creative director or the curator. Will we see it less in there because we actually need the human, break the rules, insert the emotion, have something unexpected as part of it. So I kind of wonder if like the role of Gen AI is going to just shift a little bit. Or maybe from the audience perspective this way.
I want to build on that, but David, we could just, this is it. You can just like sit back, grab a coffee, Brooke and I will riff.
That's where I brought the word.
Yeah. And did I lose my point? Oh no, I was going to riff on something. Okay, maybe I'll take over. It'll come back.
Yeah, we all work on tools, right? So we have been designing interaction patterns, and maybe that was the point that you were trying to make, because we both have been working in reality labs, and interaction patterns, when it comes to headsets, they have to anticipate intent a lot, and that's probably what we are going to be doing in the future. I was talking with Jai, that he was the one that did this model of interaction a couple of years back when he just joined Ford. And he challenged me with this question, like how you drive a car that has no steering wheel. And that's the type of problems that we are going to be facing. How you design the interior of a car that is self-driving and is designed around the driver, right? And those are the type of questions that we will be having. I want to give some time to the audience because we are kind of running out of time here. I'm going to check if you send some questions. And this would be popping up. Do I have to reload it? Oh boy. Let's see. Okay, fashion choices, they didn't talk to each other. And they didn't talk to me. And I feel like really flat.
I think my one regret with this is that the patterns on neither of our jumpsuits were generative.
Yeah.
That was my one major regret.
Okay, let's look. Yes, we talk a little bit about this, but let's dig a little deeper. So oftentimes we're using Gen AI on top of legacy tools and scaffolding. So what are thoughts on completely restarting or redesigning the old ways of doing things? This is a rich one, and we have 7 minutes.
Thoughts on redesigning the old ways?
Redesigning the old ways of doing things. So we have been talking a little bit about creating more time, more space for exploration, about new interaction patterns. We are not going to have conversational UIs forever. This is a good starting point, but there will be other ways to interact with the machine. So how are we going to redesign the ways that we are doing things?
I mean, I think first of all, it's not if, it's when. Clearly, technology is completely reshaping our world, which I think is exciting. How? I mean, I think it's just, personally from my perspective, working on creative tools, I feel like it's just core integration in the fundamentals of the tools. And I think the tool, as we see now, acknowledging that like Adobe tools used to be the set of tools you used if you were a creator. Now, obviously we're at the free pick conference. There's more democratization of creative tools, and I think that's a really good thing. There's smaller companies and other people who are able to think about tools and do things in ways that a large company isn't. And I think that's good.
Yeah, so something that comes to mind. I was part of the workshop yesterday where you can create your own little video. The prompt was like, "What do you want to be when you were a kid?" And like create a video on that in an hour. And there was something interesting, just like the number of tools. Obviously, this is today, and if we're talking about medium-term future. But the person next to me commented like, "Oh no, I'm now in this tool and it doesn't remember any of my context." And I thought that was really interesting, thinking about like if you're building the stack from scratch. Like, what does that look like if you are using multiple tools together, and what does one sort of super tool look like? Is that a future that we want to move towards? But that was something that was interesting in a full-on Gen AI workflow.
Yeah, and then like more like thinking about agentic workflows, like more expert dedicated agents, what type of tools will live locally, like on your watch, your phone, and which ones are more adapted to the cloud? How do you delegate questions? A little bit also to the idea of the definition of work. Right? Laura Herman was making the comparison of we are going to be art directors. Now we were going to be curators, right?
Yes.
And art directors. Recently, I've been hearing more like we are going to be more like a service designers, and you teach design systems, and that's that's exploring the boundaries of the impact of the work that we are doing. That's something that we will have to rethink.
Yeah, thinking about multiple stakeholders. I think like the idea, I mean, certainly like Europe has had this dawning, like I don't know, 20 years of huge service design community there, but moving towards thinking about who are all the stakeholders affected by our technology. Like if you're designing a autonomous vehicle, people have known for ages, like what does that mean for how infrastructure changes? What does that mean for pedestrians and cyclists and so on and so forth? And taking that lens, like we need to expand our frame beyond just like we've user-centered approach. No, like what is a sort of a multi-stakeholder-centered approach? Because there are so many implications for our work, and even just at the user level, there's probably a whole ecosystem of embedded AI that needs to work together. So zooming out is going to be really important. But I think at the same time, this was the point that I blanked on when I was going to build up Brooke's point earlier. I think there is this interesting tension right now as we prepare for that future. Like if you're training to be an art director, you still need to learn the sort of hands-on, like you still want to do some of the analog things. You don't want to like give up your color theory just because you could offload it. You still have to build those foundations that develop taste. And I'll tell you, that is sometimes a hard sell to students, especially if they're like, what will make me most applicable to a job like tomorrow? It's like, okay, what's the long game, and how do you build both those micro and macro skills to prepare that future and show that both are relevant and important? Like, why do I need the analog skills if machines will do it all?
Why do I need to learn backend and full stack and low-level coding?
It kind of reminds me of the conversation we were having earlier, and I don't know if John Made is in the room. If he isn't, we'll have to ask him about it later. But I really loved the slide about the like UI as an obstacle course to get to the end goal, and one of the characters' arms were cut off or something like that. And it's like,
it looked like.
yeah, you'll get to the goal, but you'll be missing something. Or, it's like, was that intentional? Was it not? And I think there is an interesting, whether it was intentional or not, there's something interesting to it. It's like, you still, like, yes, Gen AI will get you there, AI will get you there, no problem. But you still need that, not always. And I think there'll be some things that you don't, but like, will you still need that person there to ensure that the entire thing gets to the end goal, not just bits and pieces of it? There's a sort of like we talked about this, Stefanie, about, with research, yes, ChatGPT or, Claude or your LLM of choice can summarize all the research, but the subtleties and the nuances that come out of that can be often lost. And I think that's part of it.
Yeah, something that we see when you read the testimonials or the summaries or you watch the video. Yeah. That's you identify those subtleties and you identify those feelings. Yeah. That's something that is really hard to automate. Yeah. You still need that. We may have time for just one question. Okay, I found it a little hard to adapt and get learning opportunities for AI production when traditional production is still the mainstream in a big corporate system. Who wants to take this one?
That's tough. I mean, that's a lot of times why I go into Adobe customers and sort of like just help them figure out how they can do it. And production is the #1 thing that people want to get rid of. You know, I would argue that no one goes to school to be a production designer. If you do, come talk to me. I'd love to hear from you. But like, your goal is to do something creative. That's the entire reason why you go into a creative field. And so I think it's just going to take time for some companies to adopt, you know, being able to, you know, hey, have Gen AI extend your photo shoot, or, you know, create all those personalized versions for, you know, 150 countries or whatever it is that you need.
It will be like a survival differentiation thing in the world of infinite content. How you stand at the top.
Yep.
Yeah, my ICR timer is run out, so I'll be fast. So that the matrix I was describing earlier, I've also used that in a tool adoption context. Like if you look at, okay, this is what we need to have done, and this is sort of how many degrees of freedom we have to maybe bring in a new tool. Like where can we where can we get the most value by adding in Gen AI? Like which part might we want to offload, and do we have maybe the buy-in to be able to bring in a Gen AI tool for that piece? So I know, you know, depending on where you sit in the organization, you may or may not be able to you know, have that pull, but same sort of idea, like being very intentional about what we want to offload, even if it's more about adopting tools in your workflow, not just building, you know, new features and things like that too.
Yeah, yes, for the sake of production. Yeah, that's the benefit that we were talking before. These tools are really approachable. You don't have to spend months learning a new skill to produce something that you can explore and iterate. Shortly before coming in, I was talking with a friend of mine, and he was making a reflection about where he is in his career. He's super talented. And he said, I always wanted to be a type of designer, creative designer, but I needed a job. And I had to do what my job was asking for. But now I feel at age 47 that I can be the designer that I want to be. And I want to, at least for my end, living it like that, with this sentence. I don't know if you have like some final remarks on your own.
Final remarks. I think just reiterating what I shared earlier about how I see you know, this unprecedented pace of Gen AI. It's reframing, and it's not redefining craft, not replacing craft. But I think one thing to keep in mind, though, is as that shift happens, you know, stay curious, but also think about that service design mindset of like, what are the implications of, you know, you're automating something, or if you're putting a product out in the world that automates something, that changes the broader system in which it lives. So how can you, you know, how do you make a positive impact as a creative as you're doing that?
I think my biggest thing is like, just keep it weird, you know? Like I'm seeing as the models get better, I'm starting to get bored with them because they're getting too good. And I really, really like the weirdness. We're totally out of time, but at one point when we were early on building Firefly, there was a point in time where it was generating human faces on literally everything. And it was really fucking awesome. I'm like, I want that version back. And so I think that's the thing that I would say is like, we're here to be creative. Like, just keep pushing, make weird shit.
Cool, we'll leave it like this. Thank you so much, everybody. And keep on enjoying the rest of the day.
Thanks, David.